Well, it's time for the news review of our bulletin. U.S. President Donald Trump says that he will pull his country out of the UN Arms Trade Treaty signed by his predecessor, Barack Obama.
And I am officially announcing today that the United States will be revoking the effect of America's signature from this badly misguided treatment. We're taking our signature back.
Trump added that Washington will soon hand the UN a formal notice on the U.S. withdrawal. He made the announcement during his address to the annual meeting of a powerful gun lobby. Trump's announcement was welcomed by members of the National Rifle Association, but rights groups including Oxfam and Amnesty International issued immediate condemnations. Amnesty said the announcement by the Trump administration will, quote, reopen the floodgates for arms sales with weakened human rights criteria. Alfred de Zayas, former UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order for 2012-2018, joins us from Geneva. We also have Marcus Papadopoulos, editor at Politics First, who joins us from London. I'd like to welcome you both. Alfred de Zayas, what we're looking at here is, aside from the U.S. pulling out of another treaty, is the danger that this poses. How will this affect, for example, arms sales, as it's been one of the critiques leveled against this?
Well, the United States has been the leader. Over 50% of the arms trade in conventional weapons is American anyway. So the National Rifle Association and the military-industrial complex in the United States have already been making the lion's share of profits in the wars in the world. I mean, we have been selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, allowing Saudi Arabia to massacre the civilian population of Yemen. We've sold weapons so that we've used ourselves the weapons, conventional weapons in Syria and Libya and Iraq and elsewhere. In any event, we have a system of what you might call merchants of death, of war profiteering. And there is an interest, simply an economic interest, in not reducing the arms trade. In my press releases, which I issued back in 2014, when the treaty entered into force, and also in several media statements that I issued in connection with International Day of Peace, I pointed out it's not just a matter of reducing, of controlling arms trade, but it's imperative to reduce it. That is also the opinion of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who is highly worried about the frontal attack of the United States president against all of international law and international order. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a principle of international law called pacta sunt servanda, which means that you enter into treaties in good faith and you are supposed to implement those treaties and not unilaterally pull out, as the United States has done, from the Paris Climate Agreement, from the Iran nuclear accord, et cetera, et cetera. It is shameful for a country that considers itself part of the civilized world and part of the international community. But the international community has not sufficiently condemned this behavior by President Trump. And I think it's high time for the General Assembly to elevate these legal questions to the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion, since indeed many of these actions do contravene customary international law and numerous international treaties. And there are consequences. Ubi ius, ibi remedium. If there is law, there must be a remedy. If there's a violation of law, there must be reparation and compensation. And that applies also in the whole area of sanctions, which should be condemned by the International Court of Justice, and not just by myself or by Idris Yasairi, who is another UN rapporteur who has condemned sanctions in the past.
I see. Okay, well, let's, Marcus Papadopoulos, take what Alfred Zayas there said about economic interest. Do you think, given the setting that Trump made this announcement on, addressing the NRA, that there is an economic interest perhaps driving the decision that he made?
Well, let me just clarify something. There is no such thing as the international community. The international community is not the world community. When American and British politicians talk about the international community, they are, of course, talking about America, Britain, Canada, Australia, and countries that are supporters of America and Britain, for example, Israel and Saudi Arabia. So let me just clarify, the international community does not constitute the world community. Now, in my mind, there are two core reasons accounting for Trump's announcement. First, the fact that he announced this at the annual conference of the National Rifle Association demonstrates that he is beginning to maneuver. He's beginning to maneuver in relation to the presidential election in America, which of course is going to be held in 2020. Why? Because the members and supporters of the NRA constitute a core support base for Trump, and therefore he is giving the NRA, its members and its supporters, what it wants. He's telling them what they want to hear. The 2020 election, as we know, is only 2 years away, and Mr. Trump is looking to that. So he's beginning to make political maneuvers. The second reason is that Mr. Trump does not want to be impeded. He does not want any constraints on him when he concludes arms deals around the world, principally with countries such as Saudi Arabia, other Gulf countries, and Israel. And we know that Donald Trump, in his first few months in the White House, signed an arms deal with Saudi Arabia to the tune of approximately $500 billion. And many of those weapons that the Americans have started supplying to Saudi Arabia are being used in Yemen against civilians, including children. And there is a lot of attention, a lot of spotlight being shone on what is happening in Yemen. And it doesn't look very good for America. It doesn't look very good for America's image. It's, I would argue, a PR disaster for America. So by pulling out of this arms treaty, it means that America, under Mr. Trump, will be free to sell weapons and to make vast amounts of money to any country in the world, no matter how repugnant that country is. There will be no constraints on America going forward because of Mr. Trump's decision, his announcement at the NRA conference.
Thank you for that, Marcus Papadopoulos, editor of Politics First, and thank you, Alfred Zayas, former UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order from the years 2012 through 18. And that does it for our news review.